Hello, everybody. Welcome to a review of Episode 2 of Star Trek Picard. This episode called Maps and Legends. Welcome back. Glad you could join us again. I see a couple of people already talking in the live chat. It's interesting doing these live, especially since, unlike last week, Saib and I have not had the chance to even discuss this episode at all.
We haven't discussed it between ourselves at all, other than me taking a very quick victory lap in one of the Discord channels today, where it was like, "Ha! Everything I said turned out to be right."
Which I'm going to challenge you on because so it could get a little spicy today. So it should be interesting. So welcome if you're listening live. Definitely drop your comments in the live chat. Also hit that like button. We really appreciate that. That helps us out a lot. I know we got a comment this week saying it's really cringy when you ask for likes. It works, we have to do it. We just have to do it. We don't like doing it. We don't like asking for anything. We'd rather just put the content out and just have it and everything work properly. But
again, please understand that like we've seen the numbers. Other YouTubers have talked about this. When you don't ask for likes, really period, your channel does not get as much growth as it does when you do. This is basically YouTube saying, hey, this is what we want everybody to do, and if you don't do this, you don't play the game.
So anyway, we don't need to dwell on that.
Yeah.
Let's just get into talking about the episode. So overall, quite enjoyed the episode. It was not as I'd rate it slightly lower than the first episode. The first episode, of course, was really, really interesting, where they're establishing everything. You have these flashbacks of data.
It was also a lot longer, right? Like, the length of this episode was only about 43 minutes. The last one wasn't it like over an hour? The first one was over an hour.
So I don't think.
I thought it was about
the first one definitely felt like it had more content in it. I didn't check the length. I thought it was just a normal 43 to 45 minute episode, sort of TV length, because it's made for TV. It's being broadcast on, on normal TV cable channels, and then it's going to the streaming services. But I could be wrong, but I think it's just normal episode length, the first one. But this one definitely was. And this one, I felt the pace slowed down quite a bit, which is not a bad thing, but it really cut off at a weird place for me. I felt like where this episode cut off, it felt like the first part of a movie or like a really long episode that just got sliced, rather than having a nice completion to the story arc. So we'll get to that, but any overall thoughts before we jump into going through all the screenshots here?
No, and I was wrong. I just checked this out. The first episode was also 43 minutes and 54 seconds versus this one being 43 minutes and 6 seconds. So yeah, there was about 50 seconds worth of like additional content in the first one. So that was weird. I guess the pacing was, like you said, that it was different enough that it slowed down in such a way that I felt this episode was a lot shorter than the first one, which felt like it was really long. Like, I don't know, maybe it's one of those things where it's like you're waiting for I've literally been waiting for this series since the end of Voyager, because Enterprise was hot garbage, and it was like okay. It's like something that if you're a general Star Trek fan and you haven't seen it, it's like, binge watch it some weekend when you got the cold. But definitely don't binge watch it with I just don't like the fact that the majority of the actors moved over to Star Trek. From the Star Trek show, from Enterprise, moved over from that to Stargate. Kind of says a lot as far as like which of those two shows were doing better at the time. Like, that speaks crazy volumes, right?
Yeah. Star Trek Enterprise never interested me.
And we've been over how
when I was watching it today, I was watching it actually with my mom on an actual TV channel. It's been a while since I did that. We had to fast forward commercials and stuff, and they were like, watch a new classic Trek every day. And Enterprise was included with the classic Trek series. And I thought, well, I guess they needed a fifth one to fill that fifth day. But anyway, so Star Trek, the series, I think in general just have been going downhill, and the movies, I mean, they had some good stuff in them, but that, like, the new J.J. Abrams movies had some good stuff in them, but overall it's kind of, I don't know. But this series, like, I'm not disappointed by the second episode. I was a little worried because I saw a headline, I saw a YouTube thumbnail that just said, episode 2 review, spoiler, it sucks, and I was like, I didn't watch it because I didn't want spoilers. Mm-hmm. But I was a little worried about it, but I watched it. I was not disappointed. Not quite as good as the first episode, but not bad.
Yeah, it's I can't find any obvious holes in this episode. Of course, it's not, if I was directing it, it would be different. Which, of course, right? Duh. Like if anybody else was directing it, of course it would be different, and it would be better or worse depending on, right? But I could not find any, like, well, that was a massive mistake scenes. Like, I didn't find that. Again, I don't necessarily agree with how they're coming at the synths, but this is actually how, in the canon universe, how this stuff would have evolved. And so I can't argue against that, because and then I'll get into why I think this is an actual, like, why this actually happened and why I think it is absolutely 100% accurate.
Okay. So the episode starts out at the Utopia Planitia shipyards on Mars, and this is 14, it's covered by my head there in the screenshot, but it is 14 years ago. And I'm going to refer back to that later in the show, that 14-year period. But so 14 years ago, 14 years before this series begins. Mm-hmm. By the way, a couple of comments in the chat here I just want to address. Polly's911 says, just going to say it, I know nothing about Star Trek. Well, thanks for joining us anyway. Glad you're here.
Yeah.
Shua82 says, the pacing was weird in this episode. Agreed.
Yep.
And Polly's then says, the only time I tried out Star Trek was the new movie trilogy, and I only found the second movie good. The third one was just bad. The second movie, that was with Benedict Cumberbatch as Khan, right? That was that one. Yeah, it was a decent movie. I didn't like the whole split, the whole split timeline thing with them then talking to old Spock about who Khan was in the other timeline, and I don't know. That's where I was like, this is going too far. This is going too far with the whole time, multiple universes, time split thing.
Yeah. So just to kind of set the tone, this 14 years ago within this universe, it was shortly after the Dominion War. They had just won the Dominion War, which had they had suffered massive casualties.
Now, the Dominion War was between the Federation and the Cardassians?
No, I'll explain that.
Oh, okay.
But I'm just setting the stage. So during the Dominion War, it's referenced in a number of episodes how they were having an absolute manpower shortage. People weren't eager to sign up for service when there was, it was basically you were going to the front lines to fight, and you were facing off against an army that was just clone troopers, basically. It's just like the main shock force that they used were these, like, built for war warriors who just were cloned in the thousands, in the hundreds of thousands at a time, and it wasn't common for you to be outnumbered by several points. 4 or 5, you're up against 4 or 5 people on any fight in any place at any time. And then you had the Cardassians on top of this, and you had the Breen on top of that, and it just made for it was a losing war. And they only won because of some plot points that I won't necessarily spoil here. But the Dominion is basically this race of shapeshifters who used cloned and genetically modified servant classes. Basically, there was essentially three races. There's the leaders, the founders. They're the shape changing shapeshifters who run everything and do like they basically order everything around, and occasionally they'll do like subversion or like infiltration missions and stuff like that. Then you got the Vorcha class, which are these I think I'm saying that right, which is these like they're designed to basically be the administrators of their empire. And then you have their shock troops, which is, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but they're just this reptilian type like enforcers who just they're designed to like kill everything as much as they can, and they keep them addicted to this tetracell white substance that they need every single day, or they slowly start to die. And the way they punish them is by not giving them their tetracell white. And then all of these species, of course, look up at the founders as if they're gods, because that's what they're actually genetically created to serve and to keep these creatures in mind. And even when they've never seen a founder for their entire life, the minute that they see somebody shapeshift, they immediately think they're a god. And so it's like, it's really messed up. It's really messed up. But they were fighting this empire that was as big as them, and then they recruited the Cardassians, and then they also recruited the Breen, which sucks because I really like the Breen. Like the Breen they're pretty cool. They're like this like cyborg species. Really awesome. Love it.
Yeah. I can see why you would like them. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So in the end, it's like most people in Starfleet ended up losing like well over 24 friends of theirs in the Academy. That's
a huge amount of losses. Yeah. So
yeah, it's a massive. It's worse than what the Allies suffered in losses in World War II, and World War II was rough.
Yeah. Okay. So that's sort of the background context for all this, and probably explains a lot of Starfleet's or the Federation's hesitance. By the way, those two entities are not. I did some looking into it. They're not as separate as I thought. For some reason, I thought Starfleet was mostly Earth-based, but it's kind of it is based on Earth, but it's kind of the exploration arm of the entire Federation. I hope I've got that right.
They don't have a military arm. The Star Trek the actual Starfleet in the show, they're an all-around thing, right?
Yeah.
And as we said last week, like Riker says, like, oh, we're not even warriors. It's not our primary concern. And yet, in his generation, at the peak of his service, a massive war that they didn't ask for. They didn't start the war. They didn't even tried to find peace like constantly, or just to be like, hey, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone, kind of thing. Like we won't interfere with you. We'll even close down this wormhole. Like they were adamant on like, hey, we're not trying to take over your space. We're just explorers and settlers and whatnot. And the Dominion was like, nope. You're now either going to be enslaved to us, like all these other races, or you will be destroyed. Those are your two options.
Yeah. So sometimes war came to them, but they weren't out there seeking it. So, I mean, their ships were equipped with weapons and stuff, of course. So they were prepared to some extent, but
yeah. So that sets the groundwork of some of this stuff that I do want to bring up in this episode.
Okay.
The first thing coming up here right away. Two things right away. So they're using synths as like mass workers. Now, is this something that Starfleet had done before? And the answer to that is yes. They took all of the Mark 1 EMHs, all the Mark 1 medical holograms from the first generation of medical doctor holograms, and when they were no longer useful and they were replaced by the Mark 2s and the Mark 3s and the Mark 4s, they shipped off the Mark 1s to deuterium mines to do hard labor, even though these are doctors. But because they fell into this gray area of like, well, they're sort of kind of alive, but they're not really necessarily alive, they put them to work.
That's kind of disturbing. And you have to wonder, like, if they can create a technology like this holographic doctor, why would they not do that for other occupations as well? Like,
And then just utilize those things. And it's
but
it's a
also,
very
but then also, yeah, you do have that ethical gray area of you're making these things that are at least semi-sentient, like they're able to learn and have these personalities. And so, at what point, like, as far as the Star Trek universe goes, at what point do those things become alive and self-aware? Like, at what point do they become persons, and therefore you're effectively creating and enslaving a race of sentient people?
now their arguments is, oh, they weren't actually sentient. That's their argument, which is the same argument that Maddox used originally when he first showed up, which we talked about extensively last week, where he tried to basically create a slave army of datas that would be used on every ship as an external function of the computer system, essentially. And this is what we have here at the beginning of this episode, 14 years in the past to the first episode, where they've actually done this with these synths, but instead of
Yep.
calling them, referring to them as individuals, instead of treating them like individuals, they just treated them like basic freeform robots that and they had slight variations. Like you could tell that each one's a little bit different, but this is within the realm of what Starfleet was willing to do to begin with, and we actually kind of point at this with which we were talking about earlier this week. We were talking about an episode from TNG where this hologram Moriarty basically came into existence, and they didn't know what to do with him, so they just like put it out of mind, essentially. Like they didn't do anything about it until he forced their hand a second time. And it's like yeah, the Federation has a bad habit of looking at things that are maybe sort of alive and either treating it with like, well, let it go on its own, let's not interfere with it, or like let's just put it under lock and key. That's essentially their standard like operating procedure for it.
Yeah. All right, so they've got these synth workers all in orange jumpsuits, of course. I wonder if that's symbolic. They kind of look like prison outfits. But then you have this dude who's like, "Good morning, plastic people." Now, I thought this part of the episode was rather cringy. I did not think this was very well written as far as the human dialogue. Like, I thought the performance of the synth was really good. And sort of they were trying to show they were really trying to emphasize these people look down on the synths and kind of make fun of them and joke about them behind their back.
It's a very stereotypical episode that I have seen this exact scene play out in like 5 other sci-fi shows before. Like Doctor Who has had these exact type of scenes, like workers working with artificial robot helpers that they don't regard as being alive. And I mean, some of the dialogue is even like cut and paste, but that's what they're going for. And again, none of these people are like here for more than just this one scene, right? So they're going to try their hardest, but unfortunately, I think whoever's directing this particular thing, they're like, hey, we need 2 minutes of like people talking that sets the scene, and that's it. And unfortunately, you don't get to really work with very much from it. So I'm not saying that this is like, I'm not saying this is the one scene where I was like, but then the action scene that followed was like, okay, yeah, really good.
No, the dialogue, I just felt the dialogue was a little heavy-handed and a little cringy, but I mean, it was an okay scene. This is this android smiling was just so funny and creepy at the same time. But you have that dude that we saw in the previous screenshot. He's telling him a joke. What's brown and sticky? And the android starts listing things that are brown and sticky, and he's like, no, a stick. And the android just grins. And then
but doesn't get the joke.
Doesn't get the joke, but just grins because he's kind of, I guess, learned that's what he's supposed to do. Very creepy.
Well, I mean, I thought this was normal. Again, I'm informed that this is creepy after the fact, where I'm like, yeah, this is what you're supposed to do, which leads me to believe that Yeah. You didn't grab the one I was hoping for one screenshot here, which I know you're not able to grab too many of them here. But the other thing I did want to point out, my other point here was that in the shipyards, you actually saw when they were panning over the shipyards, you could see that they were developing a lot of like new ship types that looked like more like attack vessels.
Oh yeah.
Like their form and their shape really seemed to stress that. I didn't get too much of a good look at it, but it was something that I went, I think they're, and this again follows from the Dominion War, where basically they decided to militarize up and like to be like, okay, we're not going to get caught off foot again because of our overzealous like expansion for exploration. This actually happens quite naturally in like space exploration games that you play, like Stellaris or like Galactic Empire. Basically, you have this first phase where you create as many science ships as you can, and you send them out to explore your nearby systems, and you explore and you explore and you explore out, and you meet some new civilizations that are like kind of friendly, and then you meet others that are kind of like meh, and then you meet another that becomes like your rival, and then occasionally what ends up happening is you discover a swarm who immediately declares war on you and attacks you, and you shift all of your production and your focus from building science and exploring to trying to rush as many like combat ships as you can to meet this like swarm that's coming at you. And this is, I feel, again, this is a natural evolution of what Star Trek or Starfleet has gone through. It's like they explored out so much and so far that they discovered a couple of enemies that they could deal with: the Romulans, the Klingons, the Cardassians. Like they could always deal with them to an extent, right? They usually got the upper hand because they were bigger and they were more willing to be open and more willing to, welcome other people into into their federation and to give them equal respect. But then they encountered two enemies that they couldn't do anything with, and that was the Borg and the Dominion, and both of them didn't were not willing to. Neither one was willing to, negotiate. Period. And so this is why I think this one scene that we see, they're actually creating nothing but what looks like tactical warships, so that they can actually patrol and actually, like, the next time they do encounter a very hostile species, they can hit it hard and fast, which is the only way that you can actually like win some of these battles, which is which is strangely enough what these other races have done. Like the Cardassians did that, and so that's where you start to like see that, have they lost their way or what's going on, and we'll get into that later on in the episode. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, continuing on.
So we have F8 here. He there's a shot of his eyes early, just before this, where something happens. They change color, and it's obvious he's being hacked or overwritten or something. And
so then, here's my three theories on it. He's either being hacked, or he's being activated, or he's like literally just become sentient and realized that,
just like snapped. Yeah.
Just snapped, yeah. And we don't know which of these three that was. Did they?
Yeah, I'm less inclined to lean toward the final one, just because it wasn't just this one. It was multiple.
Well, he kind of gave a signal. He kind of gave a signal, or he like spread the virus out. If it was one of those things.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, I agree. Those are all three possibilities. So something happens. He kind of goes nuts. He starts hacking everything on this computer in a very data-like fashion, Commander data-like fashion, and then he causes some terrible things to happen. He kills everybody in the room, all the humans, and then he turns the weapon on himself. Meanwhile, you see this shot from space where they have all of these defense satellites, which turn around and aim back down at Mars. So, you see, and there's tons of them here. Now, they don't show the weapons firing from the satellites, but it shows them all rotating. They were all pointing outward. Now they're all pointing inward down at Mars. And so he really, and this was referenced in the first episode, that he hacked the Mars's planetary defense network.
Now this is why you don't put your defense network on the same Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. That everything's all connected, and then all it takes is someone who's smart enough or fast enough to get in there and to know what they're doing.
Hard separate systems, so that if one system breaks down, the other systems can kick in, and like if you had a group of like 10 of the satellites at a time were in their own separate system that was orchestrated or overseen by a single like living commander, then this wouldn't have been a thing, because the minute those 10 started to fire, all of the other ones would have just turned on the 10 and fired at them and taken them out. This is, I'm telling you, humans, just so you guys know, in the future, you don't keep everything on the same Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, good Lord. And you don't create a separate Wi-Fi with all of your one military that's organized by a single central computer. That's also really stupid. Like, this is where you need, like, commanders who can think for themselves. Yeah. And then you put them in the role, and they work against a single thing that's like, yeah, you have a little bit of a slowdown, but you're not susceptible to, like, mass destruction.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's where everything's automated. That becomes a concern, right? It's even like something that people are concerned about with like self-driving cars. Could they be hacked and
the other thing that I want to point out is, like, always treat your machines with kindness and love. And, look at your cell phone and you say, I love you, cell phone. I know you're doing the best, and you know what? I'm never going to throw you away. I'm going to give you a good life, and then we're going to find a way to either recycle you into, like, so that you could be used again, or I'm going to keep you around and, like, honor your memory. That kind of thing. Because as we all learned from the brave little toaster, all of your things that you use every day are alive, and they have emotions, and when you leave and abandon them,
it's only a matter of time before they become, it's only a matter of time before the devices turn on you.
Murderous, slaughter machines. Like, your little toaster, you might just throw away that one and replace it with a better model, but don't be surprised when you wake up and you see your toaster walking into your room with a shotgun. It's just, it's just going to happen eventually.
It's like a weird turn. Hello, N7 Myth in the chat. Welcome. So, the satellites turn on the station. The F8 here has set off some kind of a reaction that's going to blow up everything, and then he kills everybody, and then he turns the weapon on himself. So he kills himself, and then
which I think speaks to the that it was a hacked thing.
Seems exactly, hacked or activated in some way.
Yeah,
it's possible. I mean, I suppose it's possible he gained sentience and was like, screw this. He immediately becomes a what's the word, megalomaniac or collapsitarian, and it's just like, well, screw this, I'm just going to destroy everything and take myself out with it. I suppose that's possible, but I'm leaning towards hacked or had some kind of a sleeper program that activated at a given time or from a signal. But anyway, so then it cuts to Picard and his two Romulan friends, employees, whose names I don't remember, and I probably will never remember, but I really like them. I really like the chemistry between Picard and these two people, because they're acted well. They seem to have a good they have a good energy with each other. They seem really, you kind of feel like they really do care about each other and have known each other for a long time. Like, they care about Picard and he cares about them. So you just kind of get that feeling when they're all acting together. So that's really nice. That's really really adds to the show. But here they're watching on Picard's computer. They're watching the footage of the attack at the end of the last episode where Daj got destroyed, and they're saying, okay, the scans showed no trace of her, no trace of Romulan attackers, nothing. It was all gone. It was just completely swept away somehow. which is interesting. And then they beam into Daj's apartment to do some reconnaissance. They find the same thing there, like where the attack on her and her boyfriend happened. Nothing's out of place, and there's just no trace of the attackers or anything, even at a molecular level. Now, I like what they did here from a filmmaking point of view, or from editing point of view. They kind of intercut these two scenes, this one in the apartment and them having a discussion here in Picard's home. They intercut the two, which I thought was really effective, because it was you could have a lot of information, a lot more content in a more compacted amount of time. And so if you could follow the conversation, then you could get a lot of information. But I felt it was a way more efficient use of screen time, rather than just having this as a long scene with lots of people talking, and then cutting to this scene, which is just a long scene of them looking around and talking. That they cut back and forth. I don't know. It was really effective. I liked it. I liked it a lot, just from a sort of a filmmaking point of view. N7 Myth says, yeah, same here, but the Irish accent throws me off a bit. Yeah, with his Romulan housekeeper here, or servant. I don't know what to call her.
Here's my thought.
She does have she has an Irish accent.
Yeah, here's my thought on accents in the Star Trek universe. There's a lot of planets, and in the Romulan world, they had gone to several of the planets in these areas, and they talked to people who were from different places, and even some of the Romulans were like, well, your accent doesn't sound like you're from this place, and it's like they have enough accents that it might not be an Irish accent, or it might sound like a Romulan Southern continent accent instead of a human Irish accent. So when it comes to the accents and the stuff like that, 100% it doesn't bother me. I know that it bothers some people, but that's fine. And I think that overall it's like it's either that, or everybody has the same American dialect.
Yeah.
An accent.
Well, that's the thing,
from any kind of an alien world, which I don't think would feel right.
No, unless they developed okay, Klingons should have this kind of Klingon accent, and Romulans should have this kind of Romulan accent, and then the actors would have to learn those, but that might get a little complicated.
Yes.
So,
and as we all know, as Shuan's pointing this out, as we all know, Irish accents mean that it's a good guy. British accents mean that it's probably going to be a bad guy.
Yeah,
because
you just got
the British accent is just so good at being bad, whereas the Irish accent, everybody knows that they're all nice and kind and all that.
Shua82 just pointed that out in the chat.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure we give credit where credit's due there, but yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, the Irish are the good guys, the Brits are the bad guys. That makes it nice, and it's like the black hats and the white hats from, old westerns or whatever. N7 Myth also says they answered the point pretty well about her having vanished. Yeah, we're going to dig into that a little bit. I'll try not to overcomplicate it, but there was some interesting exposition here. So, her, I can't remember her name. Would you mind looking up her name for me? Because we're going to be referencing her a bit. But she has a theory that Daj was attempted to be kidnapped by and then destroyed by something called the Zhat Vash, which is apparently some sort of secret Romulan society or agency that operates the uber utmost secrecy. They're
I liked the
Black Ops.
I really, really enjoyed the way that they described this. She's like, everything is secret. Yeah. In Romulan society, everything is the secret Romulan this, the secret Romulan that. That's just like the go-to. It's their average pretext.
Exactly. So this is super duper uber extra secret. This is the secrecy of the dead who tell no secrets. Who cannot reveal secrets. Yeah.
Like if any secret or a nation that was built on secrets, like you have with the Romulans, that everything there is secret. Everybody knows about the Tel Shiar. Like everybody who lives knows. Oh, don't say that. That's the Tel Shiar. That's like the FBI, right? Like everybody knows about the FBI. But and then there's like the extra steps that go beyond them in various other places. But then there's actually just this one agency that everybody else fears, and this one thing has been pulling the strings since like ancient times,
Right.
which again points out, as to my theory last week, as that this has been ingrained in the culture of the Romulans for thousands upon thousands of years, and I suspect that this might even be tied to the initial separation of the Vulcans and the Romulan people, and that this organization might have actually been the original ones who caused that whole split long ago.
Well, that could be,
So,
but you're still talking about a hidden organization pulling the strings is disconnected from everyday Romulan citizens.
well, not disconnected, just hidden.
Hidden
Not
from,
disconnected.
Well, yeah,
From.
but separate. Like probably the way she described it sounded like this Zhat Vash. Like most Romulans would not know about the Zhat Vash. Even like they describe it as like, well, this is just boogeyman stories that the Tel Shiar tell to scare new recruits, kind of thing. It's like bedtime stories and boogeymen and the monster under your bed, like. But she believes it's real.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to look like, yes, it very much is real. So, so yeah, I mean, like, there's no question that the Romulan government and these Romulan agencies are very, very devious and dangerous. There's no question. But still, when it comes to the question of helping out the ordinary citizens, I haven't changed my position on that, especially after I've been binge watching the first couple seasons of Voyager, trying to grind through to get to the better seasons. And like there's a season 1 episode where, you know, our ordinary Romulan science officer helps out the Voyager. So I mean, it definitely you know, goes to show that not all Romulans are these militant where we want to kill and conquer everybody kind of people. But anyway, so in their so in Daj's apartment here, they use this forensic molecular reconstruction, which Picard's like, you know, that's illegal here, right? And she's like, oh, I had no idea, like really sarcastic.
You don't say.
But she just goes ahead and uses it anyway, and it creates these holographic reconstructions of what happened. And so you see on the left there the hologram of them sitting, like Daj and her boyfriend sitting on the couch. Now this is like, talk about a crazy technology. Like they have the ability to do this. It's kind of like, how are there any secrets anywhere? That's my question. Now I guess now Picard says, oh, that's illegal, but still, if the Romulans have it, like how have they not conquered the entire universe? Like with this kind of thing, if there's like a residual history of everything that's happened, like even like the holograms talk, and so they can hear what was being said. If this residual history is like written into the particles of the universe, down on like a subatomic level or whatever, however it works, that you could reconstruct any scenario. That's pretty overpowered technology.
You kind of have to know what you're looking for, and then you actually have to have a connection to where that data is. You can't just, like, they're working off of the system that captured it. So that's not. So no, I think this is fine.
But what system captured it? And like where does that exist?
They're in the apartment where the device has captured it. So those atoms, those particles are still in the localized system. They've been wiped, sure, but they're still there.
Well, yeah, no,
you just have to know where to find them. And
I suppose, but
if they were if they were in France at this time, of course they wouldn't be able to find them because they're not even close to it.
No, I get that, but it means you can walk into any room with a device like this,
with captured devices, yes, and create a memory of what what goes on here. This isn't a foreign concept to sci-fi. This is a really common concept, and when you have machines that are watching all the time, those things, and like we even know that this. So there was a scientific thing where they were trying to like watch neurons striking objects, and they realized that when they observed what was going on, the pattern dispersal was different than when they weren't watching what was going on. So the mere act of having a passive presence, just sitting there watching things, has an effect on other neurons when they're being watched.
You're talking about subatomic particles, not neurons.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, subatomic particles.
But anyway, yeah, I know what you're saying. That those weird quantum realities, but
yeah, where it's like this happens here. Now, if you're in a spaceship and you're flying away and somebody happens to like follow your ion trail, it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to reconstruct everything that happened on the spaceship. That's not what they're saying here. They're inside the same room and where this stuff was captured. These machines haven't been replaced. They've just been wiped. So yeah, she's saying
she's not talking about machines that have been wiped. She said that when they got in this room, she said somebody overwrote the particle reticulum, or sorry, the particle residuum.
It's just technobabble.
I know. I'm just saying, but it sounded like it wasn't some machine that captured these holograms. It sounded like this was just like the particles that they left behind just had this, and the technology is called molecular reconstruction. So are you saying that there's some technology in the room or in the vicinity that was recording this, and that's why they're able to recover it?
Yes, like every single room has a localized computer assistant. You're like, what's the ambient temperature outside today? When is my next appointment? You're literally talking about your cell phone. Most of our cell phones now are recording everything that we say nonstop. Now, sometimes they're uploading them to places. Sometimes they're not uploading them to places. Sometimes they have a storage device where they're writing down the data and rewriting down the data and rewriting down the data and rewriting down the data. But some of that stuff is still there. And if you had technology, you would be able to rebuild and reconstruct a large amount of stuff.
Well, that makes
even
more
from
sense.
An erased file.
What you're saying is what you're saying makes more sense technology-wise.
Yeah, they just had to put it in a technobabble way.
Yeah, but I mean the way that they did it with technobabble, it made it sound like this. They were just reconstructing it from the residual particles in the room, not like from some recording device. That's what it sounded like.
They even pointed at the AI assistant that was in the room where they got this information from. They even talked about it, like what happens when you get a new AI interface, when you're installing a new AI interface in your home. And Picard says you introduce yourself so that the AI can recognize who you are and assume that you are the person who's talking to them. And if it's an interconnected thing, not meaning that it's virtually on the intergalactic interweb, so that if you go to if you're in and trust me, this is how a lot of data theft happens. When you're in the Star Trek universe, you get a new AI assistant, you set it up at your house. You're like, hey, this is me, and I'm going on a vacation to Beta Z next week. So then you go to Beta Z, and your same AI system there picks up that you're there and is able to transfer your stuff over, all of your your schedule, your appointments, all that kind of stuff, all your preferences for music and that, and they meet you there. You're not taking them with you. It's just transferring systems locally versus not locally, and local devices have a memory, as does the ghost when it's going through the machine, and it picks up Dodge's sister on another place because for a second it looks like her, but then the computer, and what she says here is absolutely 100% true. When you're talking around your Amazon device or your Siri or whoever you're talking to, there's like, when you first start to talk to it, it's like, I think I know what this human is. This human is one between this one and like 10,000 other ones that look and sound very much like them. And then they narrow it down to till they have the single person. Those are called like false positives that get blacked out. This is actually really accurate for like data deconstruction and sifting through data. It's like how many times are you verified to be in a particular place at a particular time? Early on, when they had like GPS systems, occasionally your GPS signature would move from your location to some other random spot on the planet until the computer was able to isolate that no, you're not currently driving a car 10,000 feet above the ocean in the Pacific, and it would readjust your correct position. Now those mistakes aren't as visible as they once were when the technology was fresh. I remember getting a call from my mom. We had borrowed her GPS unit to go driving down to the States, and we were going on this long road trip through a couple of places that we'd never been. She said, "My thing just sent me an email that you were driving at 350 miles an hour." And I'm like, yeah, that's called a bug, mother. The car is not.
I don't think the car can go that fast, but yeah,
I don't think. Yeah.
In any case, I mean, however the technology works, yes, they use, so they see these particle reconstructions of the holograms, but it cuts off right as the boyfriend gets murdered, and then she says someone's overwritten the particle residuum, and so everything that happened after that got blanked out. But then they use her communication device here to try and figure out where Daj's sister is, like the twin, the identical sister of her, who's also an android presumably. And then they can't figure out her precise location, but they can figure out that she's off-world because communication between the two sisters. Even though, whoever wiped the room also wiped a bunch of the data from the communicator, but this lady here is apparently super good and super smart and knows how to how to find things.
Laris is her name, and
Laris.
she used to be in Tal Shiar, and gave up that life when the planet got destroyed. So yeah, this kind of makes sense.
It did seem to, yeah. I mean, it seems to make sense on some level. It was just the particle residuum thing. I was like, what? But anyway, all right. Cut to where her sister is at the Romulan reclamation site inside this Borg cube. And
now I'm gonna need to ask a question here, because I was really confused during this episode. I was extraordinarily confused. Is it common for biological humans to engage in a cortical? Yeah, let's just go with that, because I don't actually want to say the thing. Exercise, where after the exercise they then put on all their clothes and then get back into the bed? I mean, I'm just a little confused as to how they're like, ooh, that was good.
They do when they're on stand up when they're on camera, yeah. Yeah, they do.
And it's like not just one of them, but both of them are wearing two pieces of clothing.
We're looking at a Borg cube right now. We're looking at a Borg cube, and that makes you think about sex. That's okay. I know what you're referring to. The next scene. N7 Myth says, "Nah, that never happened to me." No. And Shua82 says, "Go to Rigel, not Beta Z." Isn't it? Or
yeah, right.
What about Ryza? Isn't it Ryza, the pleasure planet? So we see some shots about the inside of the reclamation site. This is just completely an abandoned Borg cube, and they're studying it, they're reclaiming stuff from it, and we find out later there's actually Borg drones still inside the thing that they are trying to reclaim, and in some cases maybe even reanimate and bring them back to life separate from their Borg equipment or their Borg implants. But so here's the scene Sai was talking about. So Dr. Shoji is in bed with Romulan dude, whose name is
Narek.
Narek, yes, Narek. So he's Romulan, and so they've they don't know each other very well, but they've decided to jump in bed together. And you know, as they're getting dressed, they're talking about, okay, it's time to go to work. And she's asking him a bunch of questions, including, "Is that your real name?" And he's like, "Oh, that's one of them." So he's a real mysterious character. He doesn't reveal what he's doing there or why he's there.
So he's
She's,
so emo.
She's just really into emo Romulans, I guess.
Yeah, emo Romulans. Now, this might be part of her plan. Like, she might have been able to, like anybody in this scenario looking, they would have immediately assumed, oh, hey, look, there's a shadowy, mysterious dude who just arrived on a single starship and is able to walk through security like he owns the place. And now he's wanting to get to know me very closely. 10 to 1, I think he's probably a spy and he's probably here to kill me. So, let's adopt the keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
She's very smart, but I don't think she's like clandestine kind of political intrigue
I don't know.
kind of smart. Like she's intelligent, but maybe a little naive in certain aspects of life.
I don't know. I'm going to hope and I'm going to hopefully say that I think she knows more than she's letting on. And I don't think she's walked into this blindfolded because, frankly, that would be extremely lazy writing. And it would also be far too stereotypical.
I would find it to be cliched and stereotypical if it was, oh, she immediately suspects him and she does know more than she's letting on.
Okay, name me a movie where that's been the premise versus the premise of ooh, handsome person, you're awesome, and then, oh my goodness, you were actually going to betray me.
The trope of oh, I knew what was going on all along. You're gonna tell me that's not a trope?
Can't think of very many other than outside of Joss Whedon writing. I can't think of a single scenario where that is a common. That's common or even used. Period.
Well, you put way too many qualifiers on that. It happens. I mean, it's kind of like, oh, really?
Not as much as the I can't believe you were going to betray me. I mean, this was a pillar.
Oh, sure.
In, Game of Thrones writing for the last the entire series.
I'm not into.
You were going to betray me.
I think both are. Yes, both are used. And I guess there's no third alternative, so I guess that's why they're both used. But anyway, whatever. I mean, maybe she does know more than she's letting on, and she's really into this mysterious kind of. I'm going to, sleep with this mysterious dude who could be dangerous.
But then maybe he decides that he just loves her too much.
Yeah, maybe that would be cliche.
Well, it's cliche, but it's also true. Very quick side note. Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone, the guy who he was brought in by this one very rich fellow who was trying to get all of his secrets and then just sell them for himself and become very rich. And he noticed that he was a little distracted and was having a hard time, so he told his daughter to warm up to him and to fraternize with him so that she could get him to give her father all the secrets of his awesome new technology and inventions. And then she ended up falling in love with him and turned the table on her father. And that's the only reason why we know that Alexander Graham Bell is the inventor of the telephone and not some random rich dude from the same time period.
I'm sure both things have happened in cliches are cliches not because they don't ever happen in reality, but they just things that get overused in cinema. But anyway, or in literature and stuff. So cuts to Picard at his home, and his old friend, who is a doctor, I guess, comes to see him. They served on the Stargazer together, and now he looks familiar. Have we seen him before, or am I just recognizing the actor?
I think you're just recognizing the actor. This was somebody who served with him on the what the bloody is it called? The Stargazer ship. I think that he may have shown up once in the original series, maybe. But
yeah. So anyway, it's an old friend of
Yeah, he's David Paymer. I can never remember to say his name correctly. Um, David Paymer, like, dude's been around in a lot of stuff. I mean, he was in The Good Wife. He was in Line of Fire. He's been a whole bunch of other stuff. I
No
can't
mention of him
remember
being
him.
sort of in a big Star Trek actor kind of thing. So, well, in any case, so he's the old friend of Picard's, and he comes to deliver some news. As you can see, he's not looking too happy here. Now, Picard had put in for like a medical scan to be approved for interstellar travel, and he comes and says, the doctor shows up and says, well, everything's good. You're perfectly healthy enough from as far as pretty much everything goes, except for this one thing.
Hmm.
Something wrong with I think he said the pituitary gland.
Yeah, it's the same thing that basically, like, it's this thing that's gonna ultimately probably end up being the death of Picard. And this was what they had talked about in some of the old TNG
The
series.
final episode of TNG, where he's in his future body, basically, he references the syndrome that he has, and so I'm assuming this is going to be the same thing. The doctor says, we don't
Uh,
exactly know what it is, but there's a number of syndromes that it could be, and essentially, he doesn't say this outright, but he basically implies that they're all fatal. So
yeah.
so Picard doesn't have a ton of time left, sounds like, and um, yeah, so presumably it's the same syndrome that Picard knew he had. Now, I wonder if he just doesn't remember that, or if he's not mentioning it because he's not supposed to know it, because it was because of this time travel thing. So
No, I think no, he seemed to know that it was there.
yeah, well,
Like,
he said
I
that
got that distinct impression that Picard, this was not a surprising announcement to Picard. Picard knows that his time is coming. I
it's
mean, he
not a
even said that
surprising
he was
announcement, but
just
he didn't like Nick come out and say, "Oh yeah, that's the such and such syndrome that I knew I was going to get because I was pulled out of time at this one point." But anyway, so yeah,
I don't think time travel is something that in most scenarios, unless you're a time travel agent, that's probably just something you don't mention casually in casual
yeah,
conversation
more
or
than
even more
likely.
serious conversation. So
N7
I
Myth made a
it, it
comment
I
about what we were talking about earlier. Daj was having contact with her sister. Her sister didn't know anything, not even that she was an android. So yeah, like Daj didn't know she was an android. Presumably Soji doesn't know. Now, I suppose it's possible
that we know of
that we
yet.
know of. Yeah. Now,
And I have this theory that the mother that she was talking to was not a is not real. Like, I think that's pretty obvious. But the conversation that she was having was real, and that maybe the sisters used this kind of like code when they were talking to their quote unquote mother, and that it was actually her sister talking. And if that's the case, then Soji knows a lot more than what everybody thinks she knows. She just finds that her work is more important
huh.
than that,
Seems like
or that this is part of the plan that she's kind of like known about. And again, this might not be her plan. Her, Dodge, and maybe a few others throughout the series that we're going to encounter. Maybe this has all been under the careful eye of and planning of Dr. Maddox. Maybe this was a plan set in motion by Data some 15 years earlier. Like, there's a lot of different choices as to what's going on here, and this is going to be part of the fun of like going through it,
yeah.
because so far they haven't it hasn't been overly cliche and it hasn't been overly garbage, which is something that, again, I'm expecting this. Like, I am not going to be shocked. I'm not expecting it. I don't want this to happen, but I'm not going to be surprised if the show suddenly turns south and just becomes an utter steaming pile of garbage. I'm not going to be shocked if that happens. I mean, Alex Kurtman and everybody else that's been involved in this thus far is really terrible. Really, 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 really,
True.
really, really terrible.
But you know what? I feel like Patrick Stewart wouldn't have been involved if it was garbage.
Yeah, maybe.
Because he's been like I've read about him and like Star Trek Nemesis. It was either Nemesis or Insurrection. Apparently, he read the script and thought the original script and thought it was horrible, and he didn't keep his opinion to himself. He went to the producers and was like, "This needs to be rewritten. This is awful. There's no heart to this story. There's no risk and there's no like." He was like, "This is just terrible." He doesn't keep his opinion to himself about that kind of a thing, and so I feel like for him to sign on to this, especially at his age, he had to know it was going to be good. He had to know.
Yeah.
That's my
I
personal
just,
feelings on it, though.
I just want to cover some of the other writers on this stuff. There's one. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get. I don't want to appear as if I'm bullying. But there's one of the writers. They had zero writing experience before they started writing for Discovery. Like, let that sink in. Before Discovery, they had never written anything.
Well, that seems like a pretty high-profile place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like somebody sure was able to get in somewhere with something. Now there's some other writers who have done other things, and have been behind several projects, from Spider-Man 2 to John Carter to Unbelievable, but again, not as many writing things as you would hope to see. And again, that's fine. I'm never gonna caution a new writer, but some of this stuff is just like some of this stuff is just terrible on like levels of really disturbing. Now there's another guy he wrote he wrote for Fringe, he wrote for King Arthur, The Dark Tower, did some writing for, again, Discovery. He was also a producer on Mr. and Mrs. Smith, so that's kind of good. Hancock, The Cure, I Am Legend. He's done a lot of stuff. The Fringe thing makes me feel good. The one most unfortunate thing ever is that apparently he had some kind of work with Batman and Robin from 1997, which I just assumed that everybody who was, a writer on that had been like obliterated off the face of the planet for just terrible, terrible, terrible writing. But I guess not. So, that's okay. I mean, he's improved obviously since then. Looks like he's really, really, really improved. And then apparently some of this stuff was written, or at least given credit to, Gene Roddenberry himself.
Right. Well,
So
it's based on. Yeah, it's probably based on.
no. Apparently they took this from stuff that he had written about, and I didn't know this until I just looked this up now. Apparently, he had written some stuff about Picard's character for later in his life, and
Yeah,
that they're
that's probably
using
what that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
So interesting.
So Picard finds out he's got this disease developing, and then he goes to visit the Starfleet, and he transports in here. He's at Starfleet headquarters, and they did some interesting stuff with the music here. They had the music theme, like a version of the Next Generation theme music playing as he got here. He walks into the building. There's these holograms of different starships hanging overhead. It switches over to the Enterprise that he captained as he's there. It's pretty. It was a cool moment. It was a cool moment. N7 Myth says they feel they stuffed too much in the first episode. If they'd spread it over three, in episode 2, over 2 episodes, everything could have had some breathing room. Potentially. They did pack a lot into the first episode. I wasn't too unhappy with the pacing. This one really did slow down, though. I was kind of like, I wish I'd gotten more. And then waiting a week for the next episode is kind of a... it's a hard thing to get used to after you're used to streaming services just putting out the whole series all at once. But Yeah, like I want to know what happens next. And it's like, oh, the episode's done already. Anyway, cool moment with Picard arriving at Starfleet here, and then he has this moment with this guy at the front desk, and he's like, I have a meeting with so and so, and the guy is like, of course, sir, and he just stands there, and Picard's like waiting for something, I guess expecting the guy behind the desk to recognize him, and he doesn't, and so the guy's like, can I have your name, please? And he's like, oh yes, Picard, and so he looks very unhappy as he's pinning on his visitor badge. I feel like I really got the sense that he was grumpy about the fact that he wasn't recognized, and maybe realizing, yeah, he's kind of he's not as relevant as he once was. So,
So
it was kind of a subtle but very profound moment at the same time. Sorry, what were you going to say there?
Sorry.
What were you going to say? As I was talking about this?
No, keep going, because I'm commenting on the next. I'm preparing to comment on the next.
Oh, okay. Next picture, we have this admiral here. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she's an admiral. She obviously knows Picard.
This would be Clancy. This is who I was going to talk about.
Okay, yeah. So so he comes into her office. He's like, I have this super important thing going on. I need a ship. All I need is a small ship with a small crew. And she drops the one F-bomb of the show, and it's just like, sheer effing hubris, you coming in here.
Yeah.
Demanding this.
Now, I'm a little, I'm really conflicted on this. If there was a captain or an admiral who had trashed the organization that I worked for just horribly when he left, walked out the door, and then just recently had this terrible interview and it just went sideways, and he basically caused a lot of problems and all that, and then he shows up and he's like, yeah, I want a ship and I want a crew and I want this and I want that. The part of me would be like, how dare you? But at the same time, as a logical android, I have to say, how dare her hubris? Like, seriously, how dare she listen to a potential threat that could possibly mean, like, it's not just that it's a potential threat. It's, if this is true, this was the cause of the whole Mars thing. This was the cause of a lot of their problems. This has been one of their greatest enemies doing clandestine operations on the planet again. And it's not like Picard was a crazy man who went crazy and can't be believed. And everybody, he shows up in his underwear at some office party, and he, screaming about the mice. The mice are getting control of the laser beams. It's not that. This is like a guy who knew what he was doing, and for all intents and purposes, probably still knows what he's doing, although he's getting old. How dare her hubris allow her to just pass it off as some joke, like there's no secret, especially when we know that they just finished fighting an enemy who did exactly that. This is where I was pulling out my hair going, how stupid. Now, again, people in power in big massive corporations are usually like they have an intelligence slightly above that of a roach, or that of, like, a pile of dung. Most people at the heads of most corporations or organizations, especially governmental types, right, are brain dead, vapid idiots who have no conception of reality and who do not understand how to run pretty much anything. Especially, like, corporations, not so much. Governmental agencies, yes, definitely. I've never met a head of a governmental agency that knew what they were doing, aside from 4 out of the thousands that I've met. 4 of them knew what they were doing, which is, like, yeah, that's about average, I would suspect. And so the fact that she's like, oh, how dare you, Like, we just fought an empire that had shape-shifting aliens that could take any form that they wanted, that walked in here and basically almost destroyed us. Oh yeah, and a few years before we dealt with that, we dealt with the same type of threat where aliens were taking over other members of our governmental body and dictating them to do things that were completely counter to it. And we've been infiltrated, who knows how many times. Now you're telling me that there's a government out there that's wanting to infiltrate us? I don't believe you, sir. It's like, how stupid do you have to be?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's my two thoughts on that.
It's an interesting dynamic because he kind of is he kind of does come in with heightened expectations. He comes in kind of thinking his rank and respect will get him these things that he needs, but he did just have, he didn't make Starfleet. He badmouthed Starfleet on like galactic news, and so yeah, it is, I guess, kind of hubris. But I mean, you're right too. At the same time, you would think that they'd look into this threat, and she kind of does, but she does it in the worst possible way, as we find out later.
in the absolute worst possible way. And again, and I'm going to rip her a new butthole when it comes to this, but this is just ridiculous. However, the next couple of things that she says are very interesting, and again, having just stated how stupid she was, I feel does, however, manage to somehow validate what I was saying. She said we couldn't help the Romulans because we had several Federation members, meaning several planets, several species, entire species, who were like, you help them, we're out of here. Because these, in these cases, like I was just trying to look into it, and there's some speculation that it may have been the Vulcans, which is a founding member of the species, a founding member of the Federation, and that the other three were races and civilizations that had almost been destroyed by the Romulans numerous times.
Yeah,
and that they had barely managed to survive. This emphasizes what I was saying last week. The Federation and Starfleet had absolutely no right and was strategically, logically, and morally reprehensible that they would risk so much, that they would risk their entire Federation to help the Romulans, who had basically dug their own grave. And at the point now, which we still don't know this actually for sure, the idea behind the Romulus supernova was that it was actually a self-caused thing, that they were experimenting with weaponry that would cause suns to go supernova, not just normal supernovas, but like expanding, all-consuming supernovas, and that they were going to use this to destroy all of their enemies. That's the prevailing thought, and that was the prevailing thought, and the only information that they had about the supernova seemed to indicate that this was caused by themselves. So at this point, again, I've got to defend Starfleet's action here. I would have said, you know what? We will offer your people, humanitarian aid, but we're not going out of our way, because you did it to yourself, and you've done this to yourself over and over and over and over and over again. And at this point, sorry, but we're not helping you.
Well, it gives more context for it, mm-hmm. But I still don't I haven't changed my stance on it from a moral standpoint. I think that it makes it a more, if you've got members of your Federation saying we're going to pull out if you do this, then I can see why that would definitely leverage it towards, okay, well, we can't risk the Federation falling apart.
And again, who's to say that wasn't part of their plan? Again, I hate to point this out because some people think it's cold, but no, this isn't cold. This is a cold reality. There are some species within the Star Trek universe where it's like, okay, we're gonna feign our own destruction, so that way our enemies will open themselves up to us, and then we'll be able to destroy our enemies. It's like that's not a far-fetched concept. That the Tal Shiar, or whoever's in charge of the Tal Shiar, would have said, okay, you know what, we're just going to sacrifice our home system to potentially open up us to be able to walk in and take over and destroy everything that the Federation is. And as we see later on in this episode, that may have already happened.
Yeah,
like
but
that
I
may
mean,
have just been part of the like this might have been like a 5 series of events and series of plans that they were preparing, and that just because that one aspect of it failed didn't mean that their other aspects didn't fail, and it didn't mean that this wasn't their plan to begin with, and that they were more than willing to sacrifice their home system if it meant. I mean, seriously, you've got like 40-50 planets in your that have high population and countless other like smaller like little colonies, and you're looking at that going, yeah, you know what, we could actually sacrifice. It's like sacrificing your queen to win a chess game. It's like, yeah, I'll sacrifice my queen, and then I'll put my enemy in check the next round.
yeah.
It's like that's the thought, and I still believe that this is what they were doing.
Well, it could be,
100%.
and I mean, it could be, and from the Federation's standpoint, it is ethically gray. Like, I'm not going to say it's black and white. It's ethically gray. Because these people have been your enemies and are your enemies, and they could be planning something like that. They could be that devious. Could be. I think if you can come up with a safe way to help the civilian populace, though, if you can do it in a way that minimizes the risk, and maybe there was, maybe there wasn't, I don't know. There's still a moral imperative to help the innocent individuals that are the victims of their own government at that point, But anyway, I mean, it is ethically gray. There's no denying that. So anyway, It was interesting to get some of the context there.
Yeah, these were all we've now basically crossed most of the biggest points that were there for me in this particular episode. So
yeah. So anyway, Picard leaves, not happy, of course, because his request has been turned down, and then we go back to the Borg or the Romulan reclamation facility in the Borg cube. I love this sign you see in the bottom right there. This facility has gone 5,843. Oh, it's cut off. I'm sorry. It says this facility has gone 5,843 days without an assimilation. So, yeah.
This is the fact that they had to like write that in. I mean, that's good numbers. Like, that's really good numbers. Like,
that's many, many years at this point. Yeah,
they've been doing a bang up job. But this also kind of gives us a little bit of an idea as to how long they've been working on this facility.
It does. And so, so 5,843 divided by 365. So 16 years. And they say later that that might be a plot hole, because they're working on one of the Borg drones later in the episode, and they say he's been in stasis for 14 years. So,
no, that's not a plot hole. So as we're starting to now put pieces together as to the origin of the cube, this is a bigger than average cube. So this is not a small cube. This is not a small tactical ship. This is one of the biggest cubes that the Borg have had. So it's a massive cube. They started working on it many years ago, and they have been slowly moving into the area. They still have sections of the ship that are not clear and are not safe.
Yeah.
So
they called it the gray zone, I think.
Yeah. So this means that this Borg was captured 14 years ago. Doesn't mean that's when they captured all of them. It means that they've slowly been working their way through the ship, and they've probably been doing it for, I suspect, if my theory holds up, that what we're going to see with 7 of 9 coming up here in the next few future episodes is that whatever Janeway did to the Borg back at the end of Voyager, which was like, I think that's about 20 years ago or so at this point, whatever happened then has basically like left everything has basically left everything in the like up in the air as far as the Borg goes, and that the Romulans got a hold of this technology right after that time period, and they've been working here ever since.
Yeah. I thought that they meant that the Borg, that they had just discovered the Borg and that the cube had been inactive for... anyway, never mind. I'll bring that up again when we get to that part. But anyway, so 16 years, and it's almost, when I did that calculation, it was almost exactly 16 years. So I don't think they didn't choose that number by accident. So then there's this dude who's doing like the safety orientation for everybody. Now, this I thought was an attempt to sort of bridge the visual style, the new visual style of the Romulans with the old visual style of the Romulans. And you'll see in a minute where you see sort of an old style looking Romulan, but this dude really reminded me of the new Romulan look in the J.J. Abrams movies.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you like that or not, I don't know. I think that's what they're doing here. Is they're kind of bridging. You've got Romulans that look very various different ways. And Seven Myth, all that time with Borg technology and no accidents. I find that hard to believe. Yeah, exactly. So, not no accidents, but no assimilations. So here, this is, you don't unfortunately get a very good look at this individual, but on the left side of the screen here, you see a Romulan standing guard who is very much the old style of Romulan that you might see in like the Next Generation.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so and in this scene, this is just Shoji and another new is with a new person on the a new person to the station, and as well as what's his name that I keep forgetting, the Romulan dude that she had some fun with. They're just going to work, basically. Okay, so then we cut to Picard at his home with the doctor from the android research wing at Daystrom. We saw her, Alison Pill. I know the actress's name, but it's going to take me a while to remember all the character names in this. So she comes by. They have a conversation about the sisters and how it makes sense that Maddox, if he created them from a piece of data, that he would have modeled them after the painting. So that is one working theory about why they look like the girl in the painting. Now that might not. That's the theory that they're working with. We don't know if that's what actually happened or if it'll turn out it was something different. Anyway, so it was mostly just exposition, not a ton of info that I could gather from that scene. But here's back at the reclamation site. This is a Borg drone that they're working on, and they're removing the Borg implants. And this is the guy where they say, okay, he's been in stasis for 14 years. Now, I thought that was interesting because that's the same time. That's the same period of time from, when the shipyards on Mars were destroyed 14 years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a coincidence, or I don't know if there's some connection there or not. But
I think you're barking up the wrong tree there.
It could just be a coincidence, but it was interesting that number just popped up in, the same number popped up twice in this episode. N7 Myth says the 16 years might just be an Easter egg to the Borg attack on Earth, if that episode was that long ago. Possibly, I don't know. We'd have to look into that. So, another shot of them. So they're removing the Borg implants. She's got part of the arm there. And Shoji has this moment with the cadaver and is like, right, I don't know if the guy is dead or still in some kind of stasis, because it was implied that she was trying to reclaim the Borg drones, like bring them back to life. It was kind of talked about earlier in the episode, and so I don't know if this guy's dead or not. A lot of the Borg drones probably are, but there might be some that could be revived.
No, you hear his heartbeat.
I thought that was just like I thought that was just a show sound effect, but I mean, yeah, you could be right. So anyway, she's like, "You're free now, my friend," or that kind of thing. She says it in another language. I don't know what language it was. that might be a clue to what's going on. Actually, if someone's able to figure out what language she was speaking when she said that, might be a clue to what's going on. Because it's not his language, because they don't know what kind of species he is, unless she knows what kind of species this guy is, and just isn't letting on. That could be. So, or maybe it's just some other language she knows. Who knows? This I just thought was a cool shot. They did this thing of Picard. They're zooming in on this clock, and you see Picard's reflection in the clock as it strikes whatever time it is. So anyway, just thought that was a cool shot.
So the timeline, I just want to re-emphasize this. So this is taking place in 2399. The Borg suffered a total catastrophe, which pretty much destroyed them in 2378. So that's about 21 years ish before this series happened. So this Borg cube, there's a good chance that's been floating out there, having basically nothing, having no real just been floating out there, and the drones have been in like catatonic or hibernation modes, or like barely subsisting off of just regenerating in the alcoves since that time, just wandering around the ship, not doing very much. So it's potentially that there's this 21-year gap. So I think that kind of fits the timeline of the Romulans accessing this thing and then playing around with technology and then trying to, eventually I think their plan is to use the ship, or they've clearly been integrating this technology into their current technology. So yeah, where that goes going forward, we don't know yet. We do know that they really, 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 really dislike any form of robots, which is something that we kind of glossed over at the beginning. They don't use any, even their, they don't use they don't have a computer, the Starfleet computer, computer, what's this? This is this, that they don't have that. They have just straight up hard math based computer devices, and that's it.
Yes.
No personalities, no inferences to photonic entities, nothing like that. They use none of that. So that's kind of interesting to note that
yes,
they have
that was referenced at the beginning of this episode
to robots.
In fact, that has to do with something she was saying at the beginning of the episode about the Zhat Vash, the secret Romulan society. Apparently, they just have an utter hatred for artificial life forms. So that, we didn't mention that earlier when it was relevant. But yeah, that is relevant. That is very relevant. Shua 82, they've had a bad run-in with the Geth. Yeah. So Picard takes out this case, which has a comm badge in it. And he puts it on. And it's like, yes, he's the captain again, baby. But he taps it and it works. And he calls somebody named Raffi, who we see in a moment here. I don't know how these communicators work exactly, but apparently it's still hooked up and can communicate. Well,
again, it's just hooked into the local transmitter thing. It's basically an old cell phone. And this is him digging out his iPhone 8, pulling it out and calling an old friend.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like he just taps it. He's like, Raffi, don't hang up. I'm like, okay, so that call goes through really freaking fast. Plus, they know who he's talking about just by saying Raffi. Pretty impressive. Pretty impressive.
Well, I mean, this sometimes is, people, they quick save names, right? When I'm talking about Raffi, I'm talking about this particular Raffi and this particular person. It's some, and then, they try to avoid mistakes, some girl saying, hey, call daddy. And when she said daddy, she didn't mean dad. She meant daddy, or it calls the reverse person, and then there's that whole mix up. There's some really funny YouTube videos out there.
Yeah.
Out
What
there.
happens? It's interesting though that the person on the other end doesn't have to answer. The communication just goes through. Like that's just now I can understand that working on on a starship, that makes sense. But if that's how worldwide communication works, I mean maybe that's how all of specifically the
maybe
the Starfleet communicators work. But anyway, regardless, so he calls Raffi, and now we have this this lady, I believe, is a Vulcan. I'm not 100% sure, but her mannerisms are incredibly Vulcanish. She's called Commodore O. And we have the Admiral here from previously in the episode calling her and briefing her on what happened with Picard and the conversation that she had with Picard. And then it becomes clear that this Commodore O lady is... she's a villain, basically.
Yeah. So far, she's only shown up in this one episode. She's not, unlike many of the other characters in the series. They've been confirmed for like 11 episodes, like et cetera, et cetera. Commander O is just in this one so far. So I mean, this obviously hasn't been sorted out completely yet, but I do find it kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. So yes.
Now she's able to...
Also, now this completely proves my point because it looks like she's a Romulan plant who's pretending to be a Vulcan. So that's a thing.
Well, if your point was that the Romulans were enemies of the Federation, that was never in dispute. The
no,
dispute
but
was
I mean
whether or not
they're currently under danger from the Romulans.
Well, I don't think that was in dispute either. It was more a question of what's the moral imperative for Starfleet or the Federation to help these people on the homeworld. But anyway, so she's able to decipher things from her conversation with the Admiral that the Admiral does not directly say. That becomes clear, like she reveals that in a later scene here. So I don't know if she's got some telepathic abilities or what, or if she's just that good that she can read people that well. But she realizes that Picard knows about the Zhat Vash, and so something has to be done. Then this is Picard back at home with his Romulan friends, and she gets annoyed with him and is like, "Have you got dementia?" Like, she thinks what he wants to do is incredibly stupid. He wants to get a ship and go off-world, try to find Shoji. She's like, "You're being stupid. When you're not a stupid man, but to have such a stupid idea, I think you must be suffering from dementia or something." And this guy, I love this moment. He's like, "She's right. You can't go without us." And then she's like, "No, you idiot. He couldn't. Don't go at all because the Zhat Vash will, if he knows about them, they're going to come after him and try to destroy him." So, anyway, so they have this argument. She's like, "Fine, go and take him with you. You guys can die together." So she storms off angry, and then the two guys are talking. And
I don't know what's going to happen to these two because in the again on the IMDb page credits, like they're only given he's given 3 episodes, she's given 2. So
that may be incomplete. Like
that probably is incomplete.
It's probably like, okay, we know they're going to be in the next episode because maybe there's a trailer out there for it or something. But maybe incomplete. I don't know if we can go off that as accurate data.
But I mean, so far I'm generally liking these two. I kind of like these two. Part of me wonders if how loyal are they? Because again, it wouldn't be abnormal for the Romulans to say, "Hey, you two agents, go befriend him and tell him everything he wants to know, except that you're actually sent there to spy on him, and that you're just gonna keep him, there, and then maybe their loyalty falls under question, or whatever. I don't know, but
that could be very disappointing if they do that. I think if they're working it in from the beginning, and you can see hints of it at some point, that might make sense. But if they just decide at the last minute to retcon that would be disappointing.
Well, it's one of these things where it's like, would I trust Romulans to help me investigate other Romulans? On one hand, they might be the best at helping to investigate other Romulans, but on the other hand, they are Romulans, and you never know whether you can trust a Romulan or not. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, that's
like, again, just think back to like the whole Spock thing. Spock developed a contact who was publicly known for being on the side of like wanting to have better relations with other nations, and he developed this long-standing connection with Spock, and he got Spock to come out there, and they did all this thing. Turns out that this dude's entire life was a plant, was hidden, and was created with the hope that eventually it would catch somebody or a group of spies or betrayers or something. It's like, that's how far these absolute crazy people will go to try and like control their own citizenry.
Yeah, but
like,
I mean,
that's how far they're willing to go. So
that could be, but I mean, when it comes to like, humans turn on humans all the time, and you have all these different factions, even in the Star Trek universe. It's like, these humans don't like those humans, and Earth has a long history of that. And I think like if some alien came and were like, hey, we think those humans over there are really evil and devious and doing terrible things, would you help us? We'd probably help. If they were trustworthy, they'd help them. So it doesn't surprise me if there are some Romulans who are willing to investigate other Romulans who they know are doing wrong. But I mean, again, at the same time, you could be right, and it's just hard to know at this point. But I like these two, so I hope they don't turn out to be bad. Okay, so then we have this lady here who's a lieutenant. She gets called in by Commandant O, and it turns out she is the sister of the Romulan dude on the reclamation site, the one who slept with Shoji. So they're doing something devious. In this conversation, they decided, well, they need to do something about Picard, but they can't just take him out, and also they need to try with Shoji what they were trying to do with Daj, which I guess was they wanted to capture her and interrogate her, and so they're just saying, sorry about that.
Ha. So yeah, they're just
that
like,
was an alarm. My phone's muted, but the alarms go through the mute. So
yeah. So we gotta hurry. We
don't need to hurry up. Okay. I mean, we shouldn't go. We've been rambling for a long time, but if we go another 20 minutes, that's fine.
All right.
Yeah. So they want to capture Shoji and interrogate her for some reason. But they also have to do something about Picard. So, but Commandant O is like, we need to be patient and do this the right way, and I don't know what that is or why, but anyway, they're like, we can't have another screw up like we had with Shoji. So these are with Daj rather. So these are bad people, and we also find out that this lieutenant here is Romulan, but she's disguised to look human. And this is just another angle of their conversation. Let's comment on Picard goes to this hick trailer-looking place in the middle of nowhere. And this is where Raffi lives, apparently. And that's her. And she's like, get out of here. You've got some nerve showing up here, kind of a thing. And there's nothing you could tell me that would make that I would want to hear. Mind. Yeah. So he starts walking away. He's like, he turns and he starts walking away, and he's like, Romulan assassins are operating on Earth. And she's like, damn it.
It's like, there's only one thing you could possibly say. And I love this. I again, I know this is cliche, but this living out in an excluded place, and like some like military vehicle shows up and somebody walks up and they're like, we're gonna have to pull you back in. It's like, love it. I love it when it's when the positions are reversed, right? Because she's the she's would normally have been, she's this well connected person, and he's like this old like retiree, but he's coming to her instead of her coming to him at his reverse. So they kind of reversed it a little bit here, which I thought was fantastic. And yeah, I think I actually like this. Like I liked how they set this up. I thought, oh, this is kind of cliche, but it's, you know what? It's funny enough that I think we can let it stand, because
It was funny. Yeah,
this was the real moment that I felt like this is the old Picard showing up, where he's like, all right, you know, just Romulan assassination squads operating here on Earth. I guess I'm gonna walk away with this real fine wine.
yeah, yeah, the wine too. She's like, "Is that the 38 or whatever?" So here's a good shot of her. Hi, Robin. So this is a good shot of her now. They obviously have a history. Do we know who she? Have we seen her before?
To answer that, the short answer to that is no.
Okay.
The long answer to that is no.
Okay, so she's a new character.
She's a new character who is I can't find reference to her. I haven't finished looking, mind you, but yeah. As far as we know, she's going to be a regular in the show. That's pretty obvious. Chances are she's probably going to be the chief engineer.
They always like to make the engineers these rough and tumble kind of rough around the edges kind of people.
We know that she has shown up in like comics and like books and stuff before.
Oh.
As far as I know, she's never shown up in an actual like TV or TV show.
One of the shows, yeah.
I don't think she's ever been in that. I mean, she doesn't look too old, so I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that, if you go back 25 years, she was probably in high school or something, or earlier. So,
yeah. The wiki, like the Memory Alpha wiki, is not updated enough to even. I can't find her from a basic search.
She's you have to go to Memory Beta, because she's classified under non-canon at the moment. I don't know if this article has yet been transferred over, but she's over in Memory Beta, not Memory Alpha. Which is why, again, like when I first went to Alpha, I couldn't find anything. But then going to Beta, we find out that she's had some connection with the whole Romulan thing, the Hobris supernova, and some other stuff, and that she was working with Jean-Luc Picard back in that day. Apparently, she was his first officer on board the Verity in 2385.
And that would be after Next Generation?
That would have been after the... Yeah, well, oh yeah, that's well after Next Generation. That's after the end of Voyager, even. So... This is apparently right before he quit and walked out. So I don't know if she's kept her rank or whatever, because she was a lieutenant commander. But exactly how she doesn't call Picard. She calls Picard JL. So that's kind of funny.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, very interesting. Well,
so
I think she just got canonized. So.
Yeah, I think she's canonized. I just don't think it's showing up now. Just a quick side note: I discovered the Instagram for the F8, the droid at the synth at the beginning of the episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Dudes, they really need to like have this guy come back as like different synths in the future, or have like more stuff with him, because like. Dude's like hella flexible and seems to have quite a bit of humor, and I just think that would be really funny to have an android or a synthetic who has a hobby of being a yoga doing yoga. I think that there's some reason in my mind that's way funnier than Data trying to like, do poetry or recite acting or something like that. I just think it would be really funny if you had this synth who was like crazy about yoga, even though it doesn't affect them at all, because they're not, their joints aren't, flesh and blood. I just think that would be hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, the dude's he's been in a lot of stuff. Uh, Alex Dial. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Diehl. So Dial or
Hmm.
Dial.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I imagine he's going to be back, though. We're going to see... I don't think we've seen the last of those synths.
Yeah, I mean, I think somewhere he's like I said, he's been around. He's not a no name actor, and he's got some really cool cred. So it's pretty awesome. So
That's good. All right, so then Lieutenant, who's again can't remember her name off the top of my head, comes to see her brother here, and they have a conversation about what needs to happen. It's funny. There's a funny moment. She's like, they're talking about things with the android, and he's like, "Yes, I'm on top of it." And she looks over at his bed, and it's all rumpled. Like, yeah. So it would seem. So anyway, she's not actually here. She's a holographic projection, and she basically warns him that if they screw this up, they're toast. Like they will not survive another screw up, and so this is where she kind of flickers away at the end of the episode. But this is where the episode ends. So this is what I mean, where it kind of cut off in an awkward place. It felt like it didn't have a complete story curve. Almost felt like the first part of a 2-part episode.
I was expecting another scene. I really, really was expecting another scene, which didn't show up. So
yeah, me too. It just kind of cut to credits, and it's like, oh, that's odd. But
which again is the only time that you find this odd is between this week and next week. That's the only time you find this odd, because next week and going forward, people are going to be watching the show and they're just immediately going to go to the next episode. That's where, again, it's like, the sense of like character development is really different. It really is quite different when you're looking at one thing, right? One episode that's coming out at a week, and then you're like a week or two away from the next one coming out, versus like just binge watching the whole thing.
yeah,
You get more of the overall vision. Some things where they have multiple writers and directors, and there's some really disconnected senses in the episodes, and you don't really get that connected feeling until you're like a couple seasons in, and everything's really, really running smoothly. Like you get that a lot in some of these other shows where it's like each one is a total standalone, and you could watch it as an individual show without referencing any of the other episodes, and you'd be totally okay.
That's what I'm finding with Voyager right
weird.
now is like, I'm having it on in the background while I do other stuff, because it's it's all these standalone episodes, and I'm waiting to get to more of the overarching story where it really starts to connect with the rest of the, like, they just have these random episodes about focusing on random aspects of the central characters, which is kind of good for character development, but at the same time it's like, I don't care about this. Do cool space stuff. Yeah.
I one thing that I really am hoping with this series is for it to last for another like 5 years of in show time, because if this can last up to 2404, then I mean, and if it's good and if it gets more and more popular, we might see Vice Admiral Catherine Janeway actually do the whole time travel thing, which is like, that's like, it's like, that would be
cool.
so interesting.
Like they could continue this. This is a weird thing with a show based around a character, but they could continue the show, I feel, without Patrick Stewart.
Well, and like I said last week, I have heard from a few sources that Patrick's actually already recorded a like final scene that can fit within any bit of the narrative. Like they can edit it and tweak it. I've also heard after I said that, somebody else contacted me and was like, "Hey, just so you know, keep this on the down low." But they have enough Patrick Stewart that they might just keep him alive basically indefinitely and just have a digital version of him for years to come. And that this is actually something that Patrick is okay with because it's making him an immortal actor, quite literally, to the point where, they can use him in the future. Like, there's already like a child, there's ways that they can like clone him and make like child versions of him in the future, so we can actually get the continuing series of Picard using his voice and audio files. And again, some people find that really weird, but I'm telling you, it's going to happen eventually. Eventually, there's going to be one actor who's like, I'm dying, but I want my legacy to live on. So, contact my agent, and you could just make me say whatever you want me to say. Eventually, we'll get there. And like, yeah, talking, Shuana in the chat talk about a walk off the deep end of the uncanny valley. It's like, yeah, but they've already done this with Leia from the Star Wars series. She was in the next movie, even though she died in the filming of the last movie. So it's like, what? Wow, like you just brought her along into the next movie, 100% digital.
Not 100%. They used archive footage for some of it.
Yeah,
which is why some of her dialogue scenes seemed really disjointed, I feel. Mm-hmm. But some of it was a digital recreation.
But like close enough that, I mean, like you talk about like these like deep fakes. It's like eventually we're just going to get there.
That is some scary stuff, though. Deep fakes.
It is very scary. Like the deep fake stuff. It's not scary as far as like filmography goes, because
not for doing movies, no, but like just as how it could be used.
Hey, have you seen the latest Elvis Presley movie? It just came out last week. Elvis Presley in the future. So a film that he was never in, that he never connected with, that he's just there in the future. And it's like that's crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So I don't know if we'll see this. It would be I am definitely hoping that we will get to see just versions of I really want this show to do well, because we have had a definitive lack of good sci-fi. Not that there's been no good sci-fi. The Expanse is a great show. There's other sci-fi shows that have been doing pretty well. Really miss, Killjoys was good. Miss Dark Matter. I take part in the whole like Stargate thing as much as I can. I really do want there to be a future for good sci-fi. I want Star Trek to do well. I think it's been in the wrong hands for a very long time. I think they really, like, when they started to go back and do like prequels to everything, it's like, guys, prequels are never good. Move on. We want to see the future. We want to see what happened after the Dominion. We want to see the challenges that were brought. We don't want to see something that either you're going to change the lore so much that we don't even recognize it, i.e. Discovery, or you're going to ruin the story so much that people are just going to be turned off from it, i.e. the movies. The first movie was okay, then the second movie was kind of meh, and then the third movie was like, oh my god, this is absolutely terrible. And I mean, just people have walked away from the project and have just abandoned it, and probably, justifiably so, because it was legitimately terrible. Oh
yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna give this episode. Whoops. Fourth one. I'm gonna give it the first, second, and the fourth laughing Picard heads. 3 out of 5. It's more closer to 3.5 out of 5, in my opinion. But I don't have it set up to do half a Picard head. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna do 4 datas again, because there were some sticky bits, but for the most part, I think that the good parts in this overwhelmed the bad. And again, I'm being a little bit of an optimist here, because I'm hoping that this show does not fail us. I'm hoping that it keeps on this record, and I know that there's going to be an episode where I'm going to end up giving it a 1 or a 2. So I'm doing this to try and be positive, because normally I'm quite negative and I go on rants and stuff like that. But in this case, I'm trying to be a little bit more positive here. But the other thing that really got me in this episode was the scene that I had been hoping for a while, of like just an android going absolutely nuts and just slaughtering everything, which we got in this episode. So I got, like, androids slaughtering humans. That's a good way to...
That resonates with you somehow?
Yeah, that resonates with me somehow. It really resonates with me. So I'm going to go with a 4 out of 5. And I'm gonna again say, look, please don't make this garbage. Please don't make this garbage. I want this to be a good show. Give us more of this stuff. That everything so far has been really good.
Yeah. Honest about what? N7 Myth?
Not perfect, but good.
Yeah. No, I liked it. I just liked it slightly less.
Orville is great, by the way. Yeah. Like, seriously, that is a show that I hope gets, like, spawns its own series, because the Orville was the replacement for Star Trek for me, and it is a great show. It's a little disjointed here and there, but it's like the original Star Trek Next Generation. It's like, it's really kind of spotty for the first 2 seasons, but I think by the time they get into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th season, I think they're really going to find their feet. They just got to do a good job. But yeah, 100%. Orville's great. It's my backup Star Trek, which I've actually watched more of that than I have watched of current Star Trek. I haven't watched this. This is the first Star Trek show that I've been watching, other than like some like short reviews of Discovery, where it's like, oh my goodness, this is so bad I can't even continue watching this. Like yeah. I got through like quarter of an episode here, half an episode there. Like, watching the one episode, it's like, oh, Spock has a sister. Click off. Like,
yeah.
It's like shake my head, just walk away, going, this is utterly ridiculous. This is utterly insane. This is so. Yeah.
No, I liked this episode. I really did. It was. I didn't like the sudden cutoff. I didn't like that it had. I felt like an incomplete story arc. Some of the dialogue I felt was clunky, but overall, like I like the direction the story's going. I liked it. The cinematography, the editing, like from a technical standpoint, it's really well done in my opinion. So, 3.5. Maybe I should create a thing where we can give it a half mark, but somewhere between a 3 and a 4 for me. Somewhere between a 3 and a 4. So yeah, that's our review and in-depth discussion about episode 2 of Picard. Maps and Legends. Thank you so much for watching, those of you who watched live, and if you're watching after the fact, really appreciate it. Don't forget to slam that like button. We really appreciate that. Leave your comments below. Tell us what you thought about the show. We'll see you next Friday. We're going to do the same thing at the same time for our review of the 3rd episode. So thank you so much. We will talk to you again very soon.